Most people believe their financial problem is a lack of opportunity. Scripture quietly reveals something far more uncomfortable. Opportunity without structure is a trap. You can work hard, pray faithfully, and still watch money slip through your fingers year after year, not because God failed you, but because no system was built to sustain what you were asking for. Here's the counterintuitive truth few are willing to confront. God does not bless chaos. He blesses alignment. Many believers celebrate income while ignoring design, thinking more money will fix what discipline never addressed. In business, that belief leads to exhaustion, confusion, and unnecessary loss. You learn how to make money, but no one teaches you how to keep it. The Bible is filled with people who prospered not because they moved fast, but because they moved wisely. Joseph, Solomon, and even the servants in Jesus' parables were never rewarded for hustle alone. They were entrusted with more because they proved they could manage what they already had. Structure came first. Multiplication followed. This is why so many business owners feel stuck despite increasing revenue. Taxes rise, pressure builds, and peace disappears. The issue isn't effort, it's design. When business is built without biblical structure, money becomes a burden instead of a tool. But when structure is aligned with Scripture, money begins to serve rather than control. If you like our content, consider supporting our ministry through the link in the description. In this message, you'll see what Scripture reveals about business structure that no one ever explains. Not theory, not hype, but timeless principles that determine how much money you're actually allowed to keep, and why changing the way you structure your business can quietly transform everything that follows. Why making money without structure always leads to loss. Scripture quietly teaches something most people only learn after years of frustration. Making money is not the same as keeping it. In the Bible, loss is rarely described as sudden. It is gradual, silent, and almost invisible. Proverbs warns that wealth gained without wisdom does not endure, and in business, wisdom almost always looks like structure. Many people work hard, hustle, and make money, yet remain financially unstable because nothing was designed to hold what comes in. There is a subtle but dangerous belief in modern culture that effort alone guarantees results. The Bible never supports that idea. Effort without order leads to exhaustion, not multiplication. A person can be skilled, talented, even favored, and still lose money if there is no system governing how it flows. In business terms, income without structure behaves like water poured into open hands. It moves, but it never stays. When Scripture speaks about prosperity, it consistently connects it to preparation. Joseph did not preserve Egypt through inspiration alone. He built storage systems before abundance arrived. The money followed the structure, not the other way around. Today, many entrepreneurs chase revenue first and ask questions later, assuming success will somehow organize itself. That assumption quietly destroys more businesses than lack of opportunity ever could. Another overlooked truth is that loss often disguises itself as growth. Revenue increases, but stress increases faster. Taxes rise, complexity rises, and confusion replaces clarity. Without intentional structure, money creates pressure instead of peace. The Bible frames wealth as a servant, never a master. But without structure, money flips roles and begins to control decisions, emotions, and direction. In practical terms, this is why so many people say, "I make more money now than ever, but I feel broke." The issue is not income, it is design. Business without structure leaks through inefficiency, poor planning, and unnecessary exposure. Scripture calls this lack of foresight foolish, not unlucky. Wisdom is not about making money faster. It is about building containers strong enough to sustain it. This is where the conversation naturally shifts, because once someone realizes that loss is structural, not personal, a deeper question emerges. If money isn't truly owned, but entrusted, then the real issue isn't effort at all. It's understanding the difference between possession, stewardship, and the systems God expects His people to operate within. The biblical difference between ownership, stewardship, and structure. One of the most misunderstood ideas in both Scripture and business is ownership. The Bible is very clear. Nothing truly belongs to man. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it is not poetic language. It is a financial principle. When people believe they own money, they manage it emotionally. When they understand stewardship, they manage it strategically. That single shift changes how decisions are made in business. In biblical thinking, a steward is someone entrusted with resources under rules, boundaries, and expectations. That means structure is not optional, it is assumed. No steward in Scripture operated without accountability, systems, or order. Yet many modern entrepreneurs pray for increase while operating with no framework to govern it. They want results without responsibility, growth without structure, and blessing without discipline. Jesus made this distinction unmistakably clear in the parable of the talents. The servants were not judged by effort alone, but by how well they managed what was placed in their hands. The one who failed did not lose money because of bad luck. He lost it because he misunderstood his role. He treated the resource as something to hide instead of something to manage. In business today, the same mistake shows up when people avoid structure because it feels restrictive. Structure is often misunderstood as limitation, but biblically, structure is protection. Proverbs says wisdom preserves life, and in business, wisdom often looks like systems that separate personal finances from business finances, income from reinvestment, and spending from strategy. People who reject structure usually do so in the name of freedom, yet they end up enslaved by chaos, taxes, and constant pressure. This misunderstanding explains why many believers struggle with money even when they are faithful. Faithfulness does not replace structure. It requires it. God consistently entrusts more to those who demonstrate they can manage well at their current level. In business terms, that means clarity, order, and intentional design are prerequisites for growth, not rewards for success. Once stewardship is understood, another uncomfortable truth surfaces. Many people are not losing money because of spiritual tact or lack of blessing, but because they keep choosing what is easy instead of what is wise. And that leads directly into the next issue most business owners never confront. Why convenience is the enemy of wise business decisions. Convenience feels harmless, but Scripture consistently treats it as dangerous. In business, convenience shows up when people choose the easiest structure, the default option, or whatever requires the least thinking. They want to make money now and figure it out later. The Bible, however, never rewards short-term comfort over long-term wisdom. What feels easy today often becomes expensive tomorrow. Many business owners don't make poor decisions. They make unexamined ones. They follow what everyone else is doing, assume that common equals correct, and never stop to ask whether their structure actually serves their future. Proverbs says, "The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps." In money and business, failing to think strategically is not humility. It is negligence. Convenience also feeds the illusion that growth will somehow fix structural problems. People assume that more revenue will bring clarity, but in reality, it magnifies disorder. More money flowing through a weak structure doesn't solve anything. It accelerates leakage. Taxes increase, stress increases, and complexity grows faster than income. Scripture warns that adding weight to a weak foundation doesn't strengthen it, it collapses it. This is why wisdom in the Bible is almost always proactive, not reactive. Noah built before rain. Joseph stored before famine. Neither waited for pressure to force planning. In business terms, wise people design systems before growth demands them. They understand that structure is not something you add later. It is something you build early so you can make money without losing control. Another subtle danger of convenience is that it disguises itself as simplicity. People say they want to keep things simple, but simplicity without intention becomes carelessness. Biblical simplicity is disciplined, not lazy. It removes excess while strengthening essentials. In business, that means choosing structures that may require more thought now, but save enormous amounts of money, energy, and peace later. Once this becomes clear, a new realization follows. If convenience quietly drains resources, then wisdom must determine not only how money is made, but how much of it is allowed to stay. And that question moves the conversation directly into the role structure plays in retention, not just income. How structure determines how much money you're allowed to keep in Scripture, increase is never measured only by how much comes in, but by how much remains after wisdom is applied. Many people celebrate revenue, yet Scripture consistently points to endurance as the true measure of prosperity. In business, structure is what decides whether money stays or disappears. Without it, income behaves like a visitor. Present for a moment, gone without explanation. The Bible makes it clear that boundaries protect value. Just as fields had borders and storehouses had walls, financial systems require separation to function properly. When business lacks structure, money is exposed to unnecessary loss through poor planning, inefficient systems, and excessive taxation. This is not punishment, it is consequence. Wisdom preserves wealth by design, not by chance. One of the most overlooked truths is that structure acts like a filter. It determines what flows through and what is retained. Two people can make the same amount of money and experience completely different outcomes simply because one has systems and the other does not. Scripture reflects this principle when it speaks of the wise storing up choice food and oil, while the foolish consume everything they earn. In practical terms, this is why some businesses feel constantly pressured even when income increases. Without structure, every dollar is immediately claimed by expenses, obligations, and inefficiencies. Taxes rise faster than clarity, and stress replaces peace. The Bible never associates abundance with anxiety. When money creates pressure instead of stability, structure is usually missing. Business owners often assume retention is about discipline alone, but Scripture suggests otherwise. Discipline without design eventually breaks down. Structure removes emotion from decision-making and replaces it with intention. It allows people to make money consistently without constantly reacting to problems. This is how wealth becomes sustainable instead of exhausting. Once retention is understood as structural rather than emotional, a deeper biblical pattern begins to emerge. Scripture shows that multiplication follows not just order, but intentional separation of roles, resources, and responsibilities. And that principle reveals itself clearly in how God multiplies through systems, not shortcuts. Biblical patterns of multiplication. Through order and separation throughout Scripture, multiplication never happens in a vacuum. It happens through separation. God consistently divides before He multiplies. Light from darkness, land from water, seed from harvest. In business and money, the same principle quietly governs growth. When everything is mixed together, roles, resources, responsibilities, confusion replaces clarity, and multiplication stalls. Joseph's story is one of the clearest financial blueprints in the Bible. He did not simply collect grain, he separated seasons, resources, and purposes. There was grain for consumption and grain for storage, grain for today and grain for tomorrow. That separation is what preserved an entire nation. In modern business, people often collapse everything into one bucket and then wonder why abundance never lasts. Moses followed the same pattern when he delegated leadership. He separated responsibility instead of carrying everything himself. Scripture says this structure preserved his strength and sustained the people. In business, when finances, decision-making, and accountability are not separated, burnout is inevitable. Order is not bureaucracy. It is wisdom applied at scale. Solomon's wealth did not come from inspiration alone. His kingdom operated through systems, officials, storehouses, trade routes, and delegated authority. Scripture describes organization before it describes riches. In today's world, the wealthy understand this intuitively. They separate operating income from reinvestment, personal use from business capital, and short-term cash flow from long-term growth. This principle also protects relationships. When roles are clearly defined, expectations are clear. Confusion breeds conflict, but separation creates peace. Many business partnerships fail not because of lack of money, but because of lack of structure. Scripture anticipates this reality by constantly assigning boundaries, responsibilities, and authority. Once this pattern is recognized, a final realization becomes unavoidable. God does not multiply disorder. He multiplies what is already aligned with His principles. And that raises the ultimate question every business owner must face. Why does God consistently require structure before He releases increase? Why God honors structure before He multiplies results? Scripture never shows God multiplying something that lacks order. Before increase comes alignment. Before overflow comes preparation. This is why so many prayers for financial breakthrough feel unanswered. Not because God withholds blessing, but because structure has not been established. In both money and business, God honors what is designed to carry weight. Increase follows readiness, not desire. Throughout the Bible, responsibility precedes reward. Jesus said that those faithful with little are entrusted with much. That principle is deeply structural. Faithfulness is not an emotion. It is demonstrated through systems, discipline, and consistency. In business terms, God is not impressed by ambition alone. He looks for frameworks that can sustain what He releases. This is where many people misunderstand divine provision. They expect multiplication to solve disorder, but Scripture shows the opposite. Multiplication exposes disorder. When more money enters an unstructured business, weaknesses surface immediately. Confusion, pressure, tax exposure, and poor decisions. God does not multiply chaos. He reveals it so it can be corrected. Wise builders in Scripture always worked from the inside out. Foundations were laid before walls were raised. Storehouses were built before harvests arrived. The lesson is clear. Structure is an act of faith. Designing systems before growth appears is a declaration that increase is expected and prepared for. This mindset separates those who merely make money from those who build legacy. In modern business, this is why the wealthy think differently. They do not ask, "How much can I make?" First, they ask, "How should this be structured?" They understand that structure determines how much money they keep, how much they can reinvest, and how long growth can last. This is not greed, it is stewardship aligned with biblical wisdom. Once this truth is embraced, the focus naturally shifts from hustle to design, from reaction to intention. At that point, business stops being exhausting and starts becoming strategic. And that moment, when structure finally comes first, is where everything else begins to change. Everything you've heard up to this point leads to one unavoidable realization. Money does not respond to effort alone. It responds to order. Scripture never separates spiritual maturity from practical wisdom. If business feels heavy, confusing, or constantly behind, the problem is rarely your ability to make money. More often, it's the absence of structure designed to carry it. So here's the question that truly matters. What would change if you stopped chasing income and started designing systems? What if your business finally reflected the principles you believe in: clarity, stewardship, intentionality, and peace? The Bible shows that when structure comes first, multiplication becomes sustainable. This is how money shifts from a source of stress to a tool for impact. Ask yourself honestly, are you building something that can last, or something that only survives while you're pushing it? Are you making money or are you keeping it? The answers to those questions don't require hustle, they require wisdom. And wisdom always begins with design. Write in the comments, "God can trust me with more because I manage well," and watch how this powerful declaration begins to shift the course of your business and your finances from this day forward. If this message challenged the way you see your business or your finances, don't ignore that tension. Apply what you've learned. Rethink your structure. Seek wise counsel. And if this message spoke to you, consider supporting our ministry through the link in the description, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you can continue learning how biblical principles can transform your business, your money, and your future.